Hello, welcome. So this video is a tailored explanation of how to navigate the budget draft template workbook. So this budget draft template workbook was prepared by Urban Creek Consulting, and it's meant to be a workbook that can be used by any user, regardless of your financial understanding of your programs and your budgets and your ease of using Excel. So we've tried to put in a lot of explanations as to how to go about beginning the program. So in the very first page or the first tab we call on the bottom here, where it says instructions, the very first tab on the lower left section of the workbook, goes through the instructions of how to make changes. And so we put things in red that are kind of important for you to understand. And so it goes through in each section. So the very first one, it says save your file. Of course, we want to do that, right? So before you begin, save a copy of this workbook into your preferred location. So somewhere on your shared drives, somewhere on your desktop, wherever that might be, that you'll be able to reference this easily in the future. And so we consider the following naming format: budget 2025, draft 1-2, draft your initials, department or program, whatever it might be. And then we go to the header tab, this first tab over here. It's blue, and we want to change the red font or the things in here to show what current year you're working on and update it to your organization's name. So when we go to this header tab, we're going to see the red font. And so in here, you'll want to change this to whatever your year might be. Okay, and here we'll change this to whatever your home First Nation is. Mine is Onion Lake First Nation. So I would put that, and then the fiscal year is 2025. We'll probably be working on 2026, but you never know. Okay, so we'll go back to the instructions, and it says, okay, set up department program tabs. So go to the first department program tab, which is this one here, and double click on the tab name at the bottom to rename it to your department or program. And under person responsible, enter the name of the individual accountable for this budget. And under prepared by, enter the name of who prepared it. So let's go here. So now we get up here and notice it brings over the stuff we entered in this header tab. So it says Onion Lake First Nation, budgeted revenue and expenditures for the year ending March 31, 2025. You'll also notice under here it says program department. And so let's assume this is administration. We'll just make that change. Person responsible, let's say it's myself. And I'm the person who prepared it. So what this does is it allows a little bit of accountability, but also a little bit of understanding who to go to if I have any questions regarding this budget. So if you're the one preparing it, put your name in there so that when it gets to finance and eventually gets to the approval phase, people will know, who do I go talk to if I have any questions about this budget? That's really critical because we sometimes are wondering, who's responsible for this department? I don't know, from a CFO level or from a controller level. Okay, so once we have that, we created some typical type of revenue accounts you might have, and you can call these whatever you want to call them down the road. So of course we have Indigenous Services Canada. It's at the top, not because it's the most important, but for many First Nations, it is the number one funding line item. So typically it's up at the top there. Other income can be anything you want it to be. Maybe it's other municipal income, other types of grant income that you're receiving. Whatever that might be, you can put it in there. This is Indigenous Services Canada carry forward from prior year. So often we have some monies that we are carrying forward from the prior year, and they have been approved through a surplus plan. We'll want to identify that into here. And you can either put it into here in this admin one, or you can create a new department that says administration carry forward, right? So you can either put it in here, group it with the rest, or you can keep it separate. That is totally your choice. Health Canada funding is a big one. Housing funding, perhaps CMHC, etc. Provincial funding that you might get. other revenue carry forward from prior year. This might be more of unrestricted funds, perhaps unrestricted funds that you want to carry forward that you don't need approval for. Own source revenue that you didn't spend last year that we can now carry forward. So if you want a little bit of separation there, there's an opportunity for that one as well. Own source revenue, we put a couple in there, First Nation gaming, perhaps you might have fisheries, perhaps you might have forestry, whatever other own source revenue you might have. There's a couple line items in there for you to do that. Education money, rental income, any subsidies and grants, and any employment supports that you might have got. So these are kind of roughly ones I've seen and working in communities. There's probably more. I've supported many First Nations, and I've probably seen various different account code names. So we've kind of grouped these into what would work for your First Nation. Okay. And later we're going to get going and understand what to do if we need to add a new line in here without blowing up this formula. Because we can see that this formula is actually the sum of all of these items. And so we don't want to add a new line and blow that up and then it doesn't work for us, okay? So these are the revenue items, and inside here you'll see current year budget. So the current year, this row or this column C, is where you would enter amounts from your revenue that you are forecasting that you're going to receive, okay? And then you'll want to add a comment. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide these for now because we're not going to really focus on that, okay? So in the current year sections, we'll write per funding agreement 2025, and you can put number 12364-025, whatever it might be, just something to track that a little bit. And then you want something for every line item. I've always said this to all of my department staff. If you put something in the budget, then you know what it is. Otherwise, you don't put it in the budget. So if you know what that is, put it in there what it is so that we can, in finance, have an understanding when we're meeting with chief and council, we're meeting with the executive directors or the CEO or the band manager, we can defend what it is you're asking for in your department, okay? Because if we don't know what it is, then we don't have an ability to defend that. And maybe that means you don't get that budget item, okay? Well, let's go down to the expenditures. Again, these are kind of grouped. And so you may not be able to fit in with all of these, but it gives you an understanding of where some of these items could be grouped under. And so we have our typical administration fees, fuel and oil expense, salaries and benefits, utilities, honorariums, office supplies, meeting costs, professional fees. These are things like your auditing, your audit firms, your legal counsel, insurance, office supplies, travel, utilities, capital infrastructure. So this might be large capital purchases, things like a building or refurbishments to your building or vehicles for a department or leasehold improvements to your office space. When you think of capital, you want to think of things that are going to last longer than a year. Ideally, they last a lot more longer than 1 year, perhaps 5 years, perhaps 10 years. So anything that has a longer useful life than just 1 year, we look at that as a capital purchase. And so some of those you want to put inside of here. Okay. So there we have a budget looking like. We have $17.89 million in budgeted revenue for this department, and we have a total of 16.6 million in budgeted expenditures, leaving us a total budgeted excess revenue over expenditures of 1.12 million. What you will notice is that I did not put net profit in this section because in a First Nation under public sector accounting standards, we actually are not a profit generating entity. And so the correct terminology is excess revenue or deficit over the expenditures. Okay, so what this is saying is we have excess revenue because we had 17.89 million in revenue and expenditures of $16.6 million. Now, what I always say is that while I would like this to be balanced, while I would like this to say nothing, so we can go and add in $1,125,000 somewhere as a plug, we don't do that. And the reason we don't do that is because we don't know if all of this revenue is going to come in. We also don't know if it's going to cost us this or perhaps a little more. So even though we have a budgeted excess revenue, we may actually run into a deficit. Versus if we're balancing this to nothing, then we have a very high chance of running into a deficit of either not receiving this 341,000 in own source revenue. All of a sudden we're 300,000 in the hole. So I always tell people it's okay if we see this. Remember, this is a budget. This is a best guess. Okay. And so I created a bunch more tabs in here, and they have some other sections in there. I'll go through what those are in a second. So let's come back to the instructions. So we've set up the department, and now we want to prepare the budget or populate the budget. So I went right away into the current year budget. But what you should do is go into the prior year. So under the prior year, enter the prior year's budget figures. So into here, let's show you what that looks like. So under this actual prior year and budget prior year. So what this is saying is that in the prior year, these are the numbers that were budgeted. So if you don't have them, talk to the accounting department. Hopefully they can get that information for you. And then what you also want to put in there is the actuals from the prior year, because then that can give you a comparison as to, did I spend more or did I spend less? For example, we had other carry forward revenue of 550,000 is what we're budgeting. But in the last year, we actually had 1.5 million. But that's carry forward revenue. So maybe we had a large surplus last year. So we don't want to put 1.5 million in there. This is typically something you would have already known from the accounting department. Okay, and the other ones are really within par of where they are. Here, fuel and oil expense, we had 360,000 in actuals versus only 76,000 in budgeted. And now we're not budgeting anything. So maybe we should budget 200,000. And you could write in here per last year. But I guarantee you that accounting is going to come back and say 200,000. How did you determine that? So what you would want to do is determine how much is 200,000 per month. And let's figure that out. So if we were to say 200,000 per month, that works out to about $16,000. $16,000 per month equals about $200,000 a year. Now, do you think it's fair that we're spending 16,000 in fuel and oil expense? If we were to divide that by a week, that would be 4,000 a week. Now, if you have vehicles that support that, that support the need for that, then that's fair. But what you should then put is say, oh, it's going to be 4,000 per week times 52 weeks a year. And you would go here and you'd say 4,000 a week times 52 weeks. And when I come back as a CFO or a controller, I'll say, okay, well, you know what? They have 10 cars and they travel a lot. So maybe that's $400 a week. Okay, that seems reasonable. Let's leave it. But if I just go and I see $200,000 and I see no explanation, I might say, I don't understand how they got to this number. And when I'm trying to crunch budgets later, I might say, you know what? They only need $50,000. So you really want to make sure that you leave enough information in there so that the people reviewing this don't mistakenly remove items from your budget. Okay. Now we can see also office supplies had something in the actual last year and only budgeted 18,000. Well, 413,000 seems like a lot. Again, that's about $16,000 to $17,000 a month. What did they buy in office supplies for 17,000? Maybe there was some desk purchases. Maybe there was more computer purchases that may not be required. So if I was reviewing this, I would probably then say, okay, I need to talk to the manager to understand why they didn't put anything in here and what happened last year. And guess what I can do? I can scroll to the top and say, oh, so and so is responsible for this budget. I'm going to go reach out and talk to them and see if they want to review the budget and add more details to that. Okay, so it's always nice to put more information, and it's always nice to have your actual prior year and budget prior year so that when you're reviewing these, you can compare the two of them and see, did I miss anything? Right? Because it is a best guess, but we want to provide a rational guess, something that makes sense. Okay. So let's go back to the instructions. So again, that was the prior year. If you don't have it, ask accounting. Then we get the actual prior year. If you don't have it, ask accounting. We start then to populate our current year budget. And in the comments, we add detailed explanations for every amount entered. And I noted every line should have a comment to clarify the rationale or the assumptions. I don't know how many times I have reviewed a budget and this is what I get submitted to me. I don't know every program. I'm a CFO or a controller managing the business and the financial affairs of a First Nation that could have an annual budget of $150+ million. Many staff, many departments, many different initiatives going on. It is physically impossible for me to remember everything that's happening in the nation. So I think it's very important to make sure you guys are putting comments into here as to how these amounts were determined. This avoids me having to come back and say, you know what, I need some more questions and clarity about this. If every department did not put any details, I don't have enough time in the day to reach out to everybody and populate all of these. So we really need people to add comments and clarify what their rationale was or their assumptions. Okay, so remember I talked about how we would go about adding rows if we wanted to add rows. So if we were inside of this column and you wanted to add a new item that says, well, one of these don't make sense for me, right? We can say you hover your mouse over this row 27, which is this total budgeted revenue. You'll see the little black arrow. So notice nothing. We got the white box or the white crosshairs. Just move our mouse over the row. You can see the row highlights, and now we have a black arrow. We're going to right click on that, and we're going to go insert. Okay. So now we can call it George Bob revenue, whatever you want to call it, wherever it is from. As long as, guess what? You put a comment so I know what it is. Okay. Donation. He's going to provide us $10,000 as a donation. Okay. So now if we double click on this, we can see, okay, the formula is good. It's still working. Okay. In the event that this formula was not working and you went, oh, it's not working, and you wanted to fix it, a quick way is to click on this button, the one that you want a total of. Go up to the top, you'll see this funny little E symbol, and it says auto sum. Just click on that. You'll notice that a whole box appears over what you want summed, and just click enter. And so that'll fix any concerns that we have within that, okay? Now that goes through and that talks about what we just did in terms of adding. And you could do that here in terms of these as well. And if some of these don't work, you can delete them. Similar thing, scroll over it and just right click on it and click delete. Okay. But rather than delete, you already have the cell here, you have the row. If we don't want to call it fuel and oil, maybe we call it gasoline. Whatever you might want to call it, it's easier for you just to make that change right there rather than deleting that line item. Okay. So once we've determined that that is done, you are able then to submit this budget to your finance department. And so what we can do here though is we can say this might be, if this is say your health department, this can be prenatal support. This department can be COHI, Children's Oral Health Initiative. This one can be Diabetes Initiative. Oops, not there. Diabetes program. And if you want to, I missed a step, but back here where it says under the department, double click on the name. So when you're in your tab, you can just double click down here. Notice where it says Department 1, Department 2, Department 3. You can either highlight it so it's all white, right click and go up to rename. Notice it highlights it all. Or you just double click on it. Okay. So if we wanted this to say prenatal support, we can just write in there. And now when somebody's reviewing our package, they'll be able to see more clearly what's going on with all of our departments. Okay. Now there's one thing I want to go through with this budget lastly before I end this video, and that is there is no automatic consolidation tab. So a master budget should be maintained by finance to ensure integrity and to prevent unauthorized changes. And I say that because once we could build a summary tab for you, but once we start making changes to either the tab name or the rows or the way things are labeled inside of here, instead of insurance, maybe it's called something else, then all of a sudden the consolidation tab starts to break and the formulas start to not work the way they should. And so I have often gone into programs or gone into templates where I click on something and it says, you cannot make this change. I click over here, you cannot make this change. Well, I'm like, what good is this for me? So that is why I specifically made this sheet in this format so that you can change things here. I would recommend not changing the top because again, these are based on the header. So whatever First Nation that you want to put in here, Curve Lake First Nation, 2026 for the year ending 2026. All of a sudden now we got Curve Lake and we got for the year ended March 31. So I'd recommend not changing that, but these other ones here are fine to change and as well make your revenue and your expenditures make sense to you. Okay. The biggest thing is pull your actuals from the prior year, pull your budget from the prior year. If you do not have these, talk to your finance department and use that information to create your current year. Okay, great instructions for you to follow. As always, if you have any concerns, please reach out to AFOA Canada and they will be able to support you if needed, or you can reach out to us. Have a great day.